Welcome everybody to our webinar where we will be providing an update on the DOE National Community Solar Partnership Clean Energy Connector project. I'm excited to also be joined by our state partners who will share some lessons learned through this 2-year at this point process of developing this project, and share a little bit more of what is to come in the future as well, and how more states can get involved. And to kick us off, I'm going to pass the floor over to my colleague, Nicole Steele, who is the program manager of the Workforce and Equitable Access team at the Solar Office at DOE, as well as leads the National Community Solar Partnership. So feel free, Allison, to go to the next slide, and I'll pass it to you, Nicole.
Thanks, Ariel. Really appreciate it, and really excited to see so many folks on the call today. I think this is a really important milestone for this connector project. For those of you who have been following the evolution of the connector project, we are 3 years in the making, which is really hard to believe, but we're at an incredibly pivotal moment. And so here it's my job to kind of remind you sort of where we sit in all of this. So let's go to the next slide, and say that, you know, and you can go through the animations, Allison, thank you. You know, we started this project when I joined the Department of Energy about 3 years ago, really with the lens of making sure that we're breaking down barriers to customer acquisition in the community solar space, really with a particular lens of lower income and disadvantaged community households, lower income households and disadvantaged communities, recognizing that there are a number of state programs that have LMI carve-outs in their community solar programs. And, you know, one of the pieces of feedback that we just received time and time again was the requirements across state programs are all very different. They're somewhat onerous and unfair to the household. Solar developers and subscription managers didn't feel comfortable collecting certain pieces of information from households in order to do income verification. And so really that was where this idea of how do we connect customers that are already seeking assistance in their energy bill to community solar subscriptions that will provide savings in the long run and will help them perhaps stabilize their energy burden and drive down energy burden for those households. And so at the Department of Energy, in the Department of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, we sit in the Solar Energy Technologies Office. And as Ariel said, I run the Workforce and Equitable Access team in that office. And really, you know, CEDO's mission is to make solar both affordable and accessible to all Americans. And this is one major element in doing that. And that we also know that customer acquisition can be extremely expensive, particularly when there's a lack of trust in communities already. And so how do we sort of leverage those key messengers and folks that have built trust already? And how do we, you know, sort of make sure that folks have the right resources in order to have those conversations? And so we were able to build a partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services, which has been absolutely critical to the success of the creation of the connector, because ultimately the connector is both a DOE program and an HHS program. So let's go to the next slide. And I think I went a little bit out of order in terms of like how we got here. But, you know, as part of the National Community Solar Partnership, we did extensive stakeholder engagement. And, you know, one of the main sort of initiative areas on our pathway to success in order to meet the goal of ensuring enough community solar exists in this country to serve 5 million households with $1 billion in savings all by 2025, we do have to break down barriers around customer engagement. and consumer acquisition. And so this is one of the big pieces of really building that bridge tool between government-led income verification programs that exist today, and connecting those households with community solar subscriptions that could see minimum verified savings, as well as strong consumer protections, and ensuring that that customer and then that household has sort of the right sort of infrastructure and protections in place to feel good and trust being connected to community solar. And so with that, we can go to the next slide. And I think this is where I hand it back over to Ariel. But what I will say here is, I think one of the most important pieces of the conversation today is, sort of talking about where we are in this process. Like I said, we are 3 years in the making at this point, but we're at an incredibly exciting time, and that the connector does exist and has been being utilized in a few states right now. And I think the big ask and takeaway to folks who are on the call today is to express interest and potentially become new pilot states and join this pilot process throughout the rest of the year. And so that's really the plug that I want to make sure everyone hears, and that we are open for business, and we are looking for other states to participate. And Ariel will go into more details on what that actually means and what the requirements are to participate. But we're really, really excited to be at this point in time to bring more states on, and really, really, really thankful to our project partners that have been participating in this whole process, everyone that's made this a success, as well as the pilot states that are already signed up and testing today. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Ariel, and thanks everyone. This is an incredibly exciting moment in this project's timeline. So back to you, Ariel.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. All right. So before I jump in, I just want to remind folks that we do have a Q&A option open. So if you have any questions through the presentation, feel free to put them in the Q&A. Anything that we aren't able to get to on the webinar, we'll do our best to address in the Q&A section on the DOE connector webpage. If you go to that page at the bottom, there's a section where we've been answering some questions about the project. All right, so I'm going to walk through a few slides that go over a little bit more, building off of what Nicole shared around the history of the project, what we've done to date, where we're going, and then I'm going to pass it to my colleague Haiku Sky at the National Renewable Energy Lab, who will talk more about how the software works, and then we will pass it to our state partners to share a little bit about the lessons learned they have from the project to date. And as Nicole said, we're interested in bringing more folks on and having this be a tool that can be used across many states moving forward. So at a high level, the Clean Energy Connector, as was described, is an online platform that the Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and National Renewable Energy Lab have built in collaboration, that allows for community solar subscriptions with meaningful savings, strong consumer protections that have been vetted and supported by the state community solar program, making those subscriptions easily available to folks who are receiving government-run low-income assistance. Right now, that is through the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program. I also want to flag all of the other partners who we have on the slide, and especially the National Energy Assistance Directors Association and the National Association of State Energy Officials for all of their work that they've done supporting this project, as well as the National Consumer Law Center and all others on the slide. Thank you all so much. As Nicole said, this project began actually 3 years ago. In 2021 was the initial development, and we've been working over the past year or so with 6 states who have been helping us really develop the software. Please, you can go to the next slide, Allison. I think we have. Okay, so here we have the goals of the project. Nicole flagged a bunch of these already, but just flagging that we're really centering through the development of this process. And I will emphasize that this is still in a pilot phase, and we're still building out and developing the software to meet state needs. But we're really focused on protecting the consumer and making sure that there are strong consumer protections incorporated into all community solar subscriptions that are connected with LIHEAP households through the connector. And the second goal is really to lower those high energy burdens and electricity bills in the long term for income eligible households. And then the connector is also helping to reduce those customer acquisition costs and management costs, those barriers to enrollment, and help to expand the community solar market generally. Moving to the next slide. I want to give a big thank you to our pilot and partner states who we've been working with over the last 2 years. So we're going to hear more from our pilot states shortly on this webinar. That's Washington, D.C., Illinois, and New Mexico. And we've also worked over the last year or so with New York, New Jersey, and Colorado, actually 2 years with these states as well, who have helped us envision and develop the software. Thank you all. Moving to the next slide. So this is just a high-level timeline of what we've done over the last 2 years or so to develop this project. So I want to highlight that we did a lot of stakeholder engagement over the last few years to really hear from folks about what this project should look like, how it should work, and how it'll best benefit both the low-income consumer, state agencies, and customer acquisition folks in order to really streamline this process. So back in July of 2022, we released a request for information when we launched the project with our partner states. And that was open to the public to provide us with feedback on how to develop this project. So we have a summary of that information available on the DOE website, and we can share that out with folks who registered after this webinar as well. We then did a lot of stakeholder engagement with different groups who met with consumer advocates, with utility representatives, with subscription manager representatives, state LIHEAP programs, and state community solar programs to really collect information and understand what the needs are with developing this project. NREL then spent about the last year really building out the software and making it work. I'll also flag that we also launched a fellowship program where we placed 3 fellows in our pilot states who have also been helping to build capacity and help make this project work. So thank you to those fellows as well. And then in March, we soft launched the connector. So as Nicole said, it is now available in our 3 pilot states and regions. And we're going to continue to expand to additional states and build out its capacity over the next year and into the following years as well. Moving to the next slide. This is just a brief timeline of what's to come this year with the connector. So again, we launched in March, and the State Community Solar Program office and the state LIHEAP offices have access to the software now in those pilot states of DC, New Mexico, and Illinois. Through the summer, we plan to add some additional states onto the project who are interested in using the connector, as well as conduct some stakeholder engagement in those new states to hear from folks about how the software can best meet state needs. And we're going to continue to make upgrades to the software, updates. Again, we're in a pilot stage, so we're able to continue to make changes. And then we're going to start enrolling households, likely starting with DC this summer. And then we'll be able to enroll households in Illinois later this fall. The New Mexico timeline may be a little bit longer than summer and fall of this year, but looking to really get a lot of folks connected in the months ahead. Moving to the next slide. So we just wanted to flag another thing that came out of this project is through a partnership with the National Consumer Law Center. We really worked to identify what are the key consumer protections that we need included in subscriptions on this project. And through that, the National Consumer Law Center also published a report that highlights at a high level consumer protections for community solar generally. You can access that report here at this link. And through those conversations, we identified a few really key consumer protections that are included in our project. We're making sure that all subscriptions that are connected to folks have at least a minimum 20% savings requirement included. We're making sure that they include no hidden fees and very clear contract terms, and making sure that there's a way for folks to submit complaints if a project is not providing those promised savings or protections, and that the state has a way to evaluate and make sure that their program is on track in terms of meeting those projections. Moving to the next slide. And I see some questions coming into the chat. Some of the answers about how the connector will work, you'll hear shortly from my colleague at NREL. I also want to flag that the connector also has built into it a self-sustaining funding model with compensation. This will be something that will be a state decision of what this should look like and how this should work. But we do have built into the connector a way that subscription managers can compensate local LIHEAP administering agencies for the work that they will be doing to educate and upload households to the connector software to enroll in community solar programs, as well as help to pay for the long-term maintenance and use of the connector as well. So this is something that's still in pilot phases that we're still figuring out, but just want to let folks know that this is the capability of the connector. Moving to the next slide. All right, now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Haiku Sky to talk more about how the connector software works. Take it away, Haiku.
All right, thank you, Ariel. Hello, everyone. My name is Haiku Sky. I am a product manager at the National Renewable Energy Lab. It's been a pleasure for the past year, a little over a year, to be involved in projects and to oversee developments of the software over the course of the past, or building off of the 3-year duration, which Nicole mentioned. So I'm going to provide a pretty high-level overview. I'm sure there are going to be plenty of questions. Feel free to put that in the Q&A section. And we most likely, we don't have anything scheduled yet, but we most likely will conduct a demo session where you can actually see a lot of how the inner workings of the connector operates. So stay tuned for that. If that's of interest, of course, let us know in the Q&A if additional details be appreciated. Okay, so high-level overview. So software development of the connector, as mentioned, we've gone live, so in a production facing modes, as of last month, which is pretty exciting. And what it is at the highest level, so it's a web-based application, was developed by NREL. And essentially how it operates is sort of a software as a service or SaaS model, in the sense that there is kind of login, registration, subscription, free, of course, for users. It's built on a cloud-based platform, so highly scalable, which helps also for the onboarding and expansion. As mentioned, it's currently available for 3 pilot states. If you'd like to go look at the landing page, learn more information, the URL is connector.nrel.gov. There was this QR code if you would like to scan it real quick. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure the slide deck will be provided after this webinar. All right, next slide, please, Allison. So one of the key things to point out is that the connector is, even though the ultimate beneficiaries of the software are the income verified households, really the connector was designed around 4 user types, as we're calling them. These user types consist of the state community solar program administrators, the state LIHEAP administrators, program administrators, community solar subscription managers, as well as local LIHEAP administrators. And this is important because the households themselves don't have to interact with the software. They don't have to use the software. And the decision for this is to reduce the burden on the households, that instead of having to go sign into software, learn how it works and whatnot, we allow them to be the beneficiaries of what the connector does without having to be required to go in and utilize it. All right, next slide, please, Allison. Okay, at a high level, this is an example workflow. This is a little bit illustrative, so it doesn't necessarily happen in this linear format. But essentially, if say we start with the community solar subscription managers, they would essentially sign up, agreed to some of the consumer protections, submit projects to the connector. From there, the state community solar program administrators would approve and validate the organizations and go through in terms of the consumer protections, all of that, approve everything. On the state side, state LIHEAP administrators would essentially add and approve local LIHEAP administrators to use the connector. From there, the local LIHEAP administrators will be able to sign on, utilize the connector, and from there they would essentially, that's kind of the first touch point with the household, so they could educate households on community solar, identify interested households, and then upload those households to the connector. So when we get to the gray box, this is the first example of where the connector is really running algorithms and then assigning projects or the interested households with the subscription managers who've uploaded available subscriptions based off of projects. And again, this is where the household data that it then becomes automatically assigned to available subscriptions. Households then receive information from the subscription managers to complete enrollment. This, of course, is outside of the connector. And from there, it goes back in terms of process to the community solar subscription managers who would submit data. They would evaluate the effectiveness of the connector. And over time, we can continue to make improvements. So as this workflow is happening, we're also capturing data. We're determining how to better serve households and and include that back into the software development feedback loop. All right, let's go next slide. So for the sake of time, I won't spend too much. I'll just breeze over these, but in more detail for each of the different, each of the 4 user types, this is a little bit more of a breakdown of kind of what each of them would need to do at a high level. So in this case, state community solar programs, sign agreements to get onto the connector, create accounts, and then approve subscription managers. Once submitted projects are uploaded, they would approve those submitted projects. And then, of course, prioritize and evaluate the program. And next slide, please. So similarly, user process for the state LIHEAP program administrators, again, signing agreements, first to get onto the connector and invites relevant parties onto the connector, creating accounts, approving the LIHEAP administrators, and then adjusting prioritization of each of the households in terms of, if they are higher priority, such as, if they have elderly folks or children or other factors, that they can set that and then it'll apply for the state. Okay, next slide. As far as subscription managers, a little bit of the same process in terms of creating accounts and getting signed up, then submitting projects that are available. And from there, enrolling households once the households have been uploaded by local LIHEAP administrators. And from there, there is a compensation mechanism, which we are still working through, that essentially compensation could be provided to LIHEAP administrators once households are uploaded. And let's go to the last of the 4, and this is my final slide. So in terms of local LIHEAP administrator, as mentioned, at the high level, the local LIHEAP administrators are essentially identifying interested households. For those households who would like to be added to the connector, local LIHEAP administrators will add that data. And from there, based off of the households that are essentially converted into subscribers of community solar projects, then compensation could be received. Again, this is variable based off of state requirements and an active feature that we're working on. Okay, so that covers everything. Before I hand it off to back to RL, I just want to mention that again, please post any questions you have. It's very high level, so I'm sure there's still a lot of vagueness in terms of how the connector works. And hopefully we can answer more questions with a future demo. And yeah, looking forward to any feedback you have. Ariel, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Haiku. I think a number of us have been answering questions in the chat, so feel free to look at those answers and feel free to post more questions for us to discuss at the end of the webinar as well. And now we're going to be passing it over to our pilot state folks who have been working with us on this project and have many lessons learned around integrating, LIHEAP and community solar enrollment and developing the software. So first, I'm going to pass it over to Daniel White with the DC District Department of Energy and Environment. So I will pass it over to you, Daniel.
Hey, Ariel, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Great, great, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. As Ariel had mentioned, I'm Daniel White with Department of Energy and Environment. I work in the Renewable Energy and Clean Transportation branch, and I'm excited to be able to talk a little bit about our experience developing this connector tool and some of the lessons that we learned. Next slide. So in this presentation, we're gonna talk about how we collaborate with our LIHEAP and also talk about some of the things that we kind of went through and all of the great support that we had and kind of where we are in our process of connecting this tool with a already kind of mature community solar program. And just to give a little background, DC has been doing community solar for about 7 years now. And we've had the pleasure of doing that through the Solar for All program, which basically is already designed to focus specifically on eligible households that are at 80% of area median income or below, and is designed to provide up to 50% reduction in electricity bill or the equivalent of about $500 a year bill reduction. So, and the other piece of it is it's pretty exciting that we actually have our LIHEAP team within the same agency as our community solar administrator. So we literally can go a floor over or go down a floor and kind of talk to the folks that are doing the day-to-day with LIHEAP. So that helps with our collaboration and made this project, I think, really interesting and had us dive in a little deeper to talk about how we can make it easier for beneficiaries to connect to this program. Next slide. So just to give a little background about how the program works in DC. So we have our agency, Department of Energy and Environment, that works with a contracting organization, the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, that basically does our renewable energy and clean energy programs. And they work with the identified installers to develop our community solar projects across the district. The district then becomes the subscriber manager. My agency does the subscriber management for all of that energy to allocate those benefits to the eligible households. So we connect with the LIHEAP team to help streamline the application process and entry to the program, basically by allowing a uniform application. So once a LIHEAP applicant comes in, gets qualified, and is receiving LIHEAP benefit, they are automatically eligible to participate in our community solar program through Solar for All. So there's seamless kind of receipt of benefit to those eligible households on their electricity bill pretty much within a 60 to 90-day window, or however quickly the utility can kind of set up the billing process. So we also work very closely with our local utility to make sure that that billing piece is working and operating properly. So looking at the connector tool, we think this will be a great way to kind of expand how we are able to track and connect our subscriber management, administration, as well as the LIHEAP participants with our community solar benefits that are coming from these projects that we are developing. Next slide. So in our assessment of the program, looking at how LIHEAP benefits connect with community solar benefits, we wanted to do a alignment of kind of policies and the benefit connections so that it was an additional benefit for the households, not either or. So over time, we've been able to kind of take the 28 megawatts of capacity that we've installed for community solar and support over 7,900 households to allow them to get the $500 annually or the 50%, up to 50% reduction in their electricity bill. And when you look at this slide, we actually worked with a public policy research organization to analyze what the actual cost, well, not cost, but what the benefits were that we are providing through both of our programs, meaning what is the dollar benefit that a household would get based on their annual consumption, and then looking at what the benefit is that LIHEAP is providing to each of those households as well, and focusing on those two numbers, because at the end of the day, we feel as we continue to provide the community solar credit to households, it will also help us to expand or provide more benefit on the LIHEAP side, because that would potentially reduce the amount of LIHEAP funding that had to go to basically pay for the electrical benefit for eligible households. So what you see here in this slide is basically demonstrating that we have access to 20,000 participants a year from LIHEAP. And with this tool, we hope to be able to connect those eligible households to the community solar program to, be able to share in the benefit and maximize the reduction in energy burden for those eligible households. Next slide. So here we basically wanted to just talk about some of the lessons learned. There were way too many to dive in for the limited time that we have here. So I just tried to highlight some that we kind of thought were ones that would be very informative for the group that we're talking to now, because I know that there are a lot of states that are just looking to get into, community solar and stand up a program. So thinking about policy coordination between your utility, regulatory organizations, of course, the LIHEAP program, and looking at affordable housing partners and the actual state's community solar program was something that we really learned a lot about, and trying to make sure that you identify where there is opportunity to align, and then where there's some potential pieces that you may need to iron out to be able to deliver the benefits and make sure that the households are not being penalized, for participating and receiving credits from your community solar program. I think another big thing was taking a look at your project team that you're working with, and I'm thinking specifically all of the points of contact across your utility, the community solar program administrator, the LIHEAP program administrator, and then your teams that are working with the community partners to engage with the eligible households. So making sure that you have a good representation of those key participants in your stakeholder groups to be able to have that education and communication so that your program can be as successful as possible. Definitely community outreach and engagement, and the timing of when you do that. I think you heard earlier from Ariel and the team about communicating and making sure that education happens around the programs, because a lot of folks are still trying to better understand what is community solar, and it can be defined differently in many states. And in DC, one of our challenges is being able to differentiate community solar from third-party energy supplier subscriptions in the district. So the education and outreach and engagement piece is huge. And I think the connector tool will allow us to be able to do that on a more individual basis as the participants increase and are able to engage with the tool. There's an opportunity for more education to happen there. Again, connecting and aligning consumer protections as you look at these policies across the different organizations that you're partnering with, and making sure that all of the benefit that's going to the eligible households is not, again, causing any unintended challenges for them. And a huge piece, and you heard earlier from NREL and the team, the leveraging the technical assistance. It's been huge as we're talking to our technical partners, because my background is in program management and not in IT. So being able to have that support from my IT team within our agency and working with the technical assistants and IT team at NREL and the others that were supporting this project really helped to have those conversations to be able to help us look at ways that we would be able to modify or be able to utilize the tool to meet the needs of the district, because our program is kind of unique in the way that our subscribers management piece, the community solar development piece, and the LIHEAP piece are kind of like all in one agency. So we're all kind of talking to each other versus there being a lot of external kind of discussion and collaboration within the tool. So we want to make sure that that was taken into consideration as we were building out, the tool for DC. And lastly, I think the biggest piece for us in DC was making sure that this was a no-cost subscription so that it could align with the mayor and the council's mandate for us to have income eligible households to avoid any additional economic cost to participating and sharing in the benefits of clean and renewable energy, specifically solar. Next slide. And I think lastly, I would say that this is a picture of our pride and joy. It took 3 years actually to develop it. It's the, I think, first district municipal owned community solar project that was developed on 15 acres of brownfield land, and it provides benefits to 750 households that helps them receive that $500 or up to 50% reduction in their electric bill. And that's just an example of, what can be done, when you work with all of the different agencies and kind of get things in line and are able to continue to work together and be able to work streamlined and seamlessly. So with that, I'll take any questions or pass it back over to you, Ariel.
Sure, thank you, Daniel. I see one question in the Q&A for DC asking how many subscribers to Community Solar have been enrolled through this platform. As I mentioned before, I think DC is going to begin using it later this year, but if you want to speak to that, Daniel.
Yeah, no, this was kind of done, outside of the tool, but we think the tool will help us to, expand and grow as we move forward, because as you saw on our first slide, our goal for Solar for All is to reach 100,000 households. That's not all community solar, but based on the dense urban environment of the district, we're finding that about 80% of our capacity and ability to connect households comes through community solar. So we're looking forward to being able to launch the tool.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. All right, if folks have more questions about the DC program, feel free to put them in the Q&A. And I think with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer Schmidt from the Illinois Power Agency to speak more about their lessons learned. Take it away, Jen.
Thank you, Ariel. And I don't think my presentation is going to be quite as in-depth as Dan's. I think we presented to this group a number of times, and so I just had a slimmer presentation lined up. So I'm going to be talking a little more off the cuff for this. Go to the next slide. My name is Jennifer Schmidt. I'm the Senior Program Manager for Illinois Solar for All, and I work for the Illinois Power Agency, which is the government agency in Illinois that is responsible for administering the 2 solar incentive programs in Illinois. The Illinois Shines program, which is our market rate program, and Illinois Solar for All, which is our program that focuses on solar development that's serving low-income households and nonprofits and public facilities. The way that our program works, where the incentives actually go to the solar developers, and also the solar developers are normally responsible for finding their own customers and doing the income verification. With the connector tool, we are excited to have an opportunity to help connect income eligible customers with community solar projects that are looking for subscribers. One really nice thing that we anticipate from this connector is that it's a pipeline of customers that we already know are eligible. So the form that we're going to be using for the connector will cover both the usual consent form that a customer would normally be signing to have their information in the platform. But it's also going to be covering the income verification part that's going to be completed by the LIHEAP administrator. And so that's taking a major part of the customer acquisition process off the plate of the solar developer, and hopefully making it easier for them to find customers. Illinois Solar for All opened in 2019, which was really bad timing for a new program, especially that was trying to engage low-income households. The LIHEAP program in Illinois, they were seeing the same challenges that I'm sure all LIHEAP programs nationwide were seeing, where they had to completely redo their delivery model to adapt to this environment where customers are not going to be coming into their offices. So it was a really bad time to try and engage the LIHEAP program here in Illinois right after we opened. So in 2022, when we were approached to be participating in this, or when we heard about this connector, we were really excited as an opportunity to use this as a foot in the door to engage with our LIHEAP administrators here in Illinois. So we've been really happy to start a much closer working relationship with the Office of Community Assistance in Illinois' Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and that's the state agency that runs LIHEAP. And so they've been working with us on this connector and in these efforts, and then they've also helped us engage I think 9 LIHEAP agencies from around the state that are interested in being testers for this, for the rollout for this pilot. And so we're really excited to be engaging with them and getting this process started. So as the slide says here, some of our the outcomes of this partnership. We're looking at the payment mechanism. So we know that LIHEAP agencies, they don't just have tons of resources, and they are going to be doing extra work to educate their customers about Illinois Solar for All and to offer this and to be able to get those customers in the system. And then there's also like the ongoing meetings and stuff like that, and invoicing, things like that. So we think it's really important to make sure that the LIHEAP agencies are compensated for their work. That has been a challenge for us in the sense that as state agencies, we are limited to how we can get money, who we can pay money to and what for. And so that's one thing that we're starting to really have to work out is if we are able to accept the fees from the connector tool in order to pay the LIHEAP agencies. Currently, the IPA and DCEO don't have any official mechanism to send that money to the agencies. So that's one thing that we're going to have to work out. And I think a lesson learned for other states in how they're going to be working with this connector is how are you going to be compensating the agencies? And the connector has a great opportunity to help support the agencies, but the mechanism for accepting the money and paying the agencies is a challenge that other states are going to have to figure out as well. Engaging solar developers and LIHEAP agencies. So we think it's really important at the IPA that the LIHEAP agencies are working with the program rather than individual solar developers. So that way it's not a monopoly in a certain area for a single solar developer. So we also see this connector as an opportunity to level the playing field for solar developers in areas. So we did have one instance where a solar developer had connected with a LIHEAP agency a few years ago, and they'd connected on some and done some referrals to that company. But the concern that we had was that if there were been another solar developer in that area, would they have been able to meet the same fees that the company was paying to the LAA? And so is in that model, is it possible for particularly small and emerging solar developers to compete if there are bigger solar developers that are trying to monopolize the engagement with a specific in a certain area through the LAA? So that's one thing we've considered. Another thing with the engaging solar developers and LIHEAP agencies is that they both run on their own timelines and they do not coordinate. So when we approve projects, they are usually not constructed yet. So we don't have any control over the timeline of that construction. We have some idea ongoing as the projects get closer to completion in our communications with the developers, but overall we don't have any control over the timeline. So I can't tell you right now exactly who's going to be open for subscribers this fall. And so we've had a challenge trying to really coordinate the solar developers. At the same time, LIHEAP agencies are seeing customers in the cycle of their LIHEAP funding. And so that usually runs from the fall to the spring. And so as we are, doing this rollout of the pilot connector, we're running into challenges with coordinating the LIHEAP agencies' LIHEAP funding availability, which determines their ability to see customers, and the cycles of us finding projects that would be willing to participate in the connector. And we have some ideas on how we might mitigate that with trying to approach projects that are already energized and might just be looking for helping with their churn, excuse me, and trying, it's a full project. So, they might just be putting on a few customers at a time as other customers are moving, falling off, whatever. So we're going to try and engage solar developers and maybe see if they're interested in engaging on a smaller level just to help support their churn rather than since we haven't really been able to identify projects at the moment that are looking for subscribers. So trying to make sure that you're coordinating those various cycles of customer availability through the LIHEAP programs and the project subscription availability in the development cycle of those projects. I think I've gone over some of these special considerations. The similarities and differences between the LIHEAP and Solar for All guidelines is another challenge, small challenge that we've had. In Illinois, the LIHEAP guidelines are 200% of the federal poverty level, and there's some weirdness at their upper ends of their, when there are more people in the household, there's some funky income guidelines there, but for the most part, the LIHEAP income guidelines in Illinois are 200% of the federal poverty level. And that's with both federal and state LIHEAP funding. So there's some different qualifications there. But overall, if you're 200% of the federal poverty level in Illinois, you can apply for LIHEAP. In Illinois Solar for All, the income guidelines are 80% AMI. And that is, those can differ very depending on which area or region of Illinois that you're in. In most cases, the 80% AMI is less than the LIHEAP guidelines in Illinois, but we do have some areas where the upper levels of when you have more household members, that those income guidelines for Solar for All can be under the LIHEAP guidelines. And in that case, we do have a process where we can confirm with the LIHEAP administrator that they do actually meet our income guidelines. So yeah, we've had to navigate that a little bit. And then participant prioritization. Illinois Solar for All doesn't have any prioritization as far as customer attributes, like if they have children or seniors in the home, if there's medical equipment in the home that requires electricity. We don't have any sort of prioritization for that in Illinois Solar for All. But we are, since Illinois Solar for All does have a limited capacity of available solar subscriptions, we are looking to see how the LIHEAP agencies feel that their customers might best benefit from this program. So if a LIHEAP agency only has a limited amount of capacity that they can get to customers, how are they looking at their customers and deciding, who's the best fit for this? Lessons that we've learned. Tracking household subscriptions. I think that's one thing that we're kind of figuring out and making sure that what happens to the subscription after we get that referral to the subscription manager, making sure that the subscription manager is updating the connector so that we know when that customer has completed their subscription. And we also need to make sure that we're tracking household subscription for the model of payment of the LAAs that we're deciding to do in Illinois, which is based on an initial amount for the LAA based on entry of the customer into the portal or the connector, and then an additional compensation for the agency if that customer completes their subscription. I mentioned earlier, our verification document streamlines both the income verification for Solar for All and the consent form that we would normally have to have them sign. And then we're also figuring out some data validation for the CSV file, trying to minimize the potential for errors with the LAAs uploading their customers into the portal. I don't think I have any more slides, but I am happy to answer any questions either now or later.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I think seeing as we have little time left, I'm going to pass it over to Christopher Dunn from New Mexico to speak about some of their lessons learned. I will flag, Jen, there is a question in the chat that you could respond to, or in the Q&A. All right. Take it away, Christopher.
All right, thanks, Ariel, and pleasure to be here. Hope everyone's having a fantastic day. If you can go ahead and go to my next slide. So my name is Christopher Dunn. I'm an economist for the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission, and I'll provide a brief overview of New Mexico's experience as a pilot state with this connector tool. The first thing I want to acknowledge is just that the development team, I think, has done, excuse me, a really good job of just providing opportunities to incorporate feedback from the pilot states to make sure that this tool is going to be beneficial for not just the pilot states, but hopefully, obviously, other states that this rolled out to as well. So I think that's been fantastic. But broadly speaking, I think that New Mexico can kind of serve as a case study for states that have less mature community solar programs. And that's the case because New Mexico's been going through implementation of our community solar program concurrently with our participation as a pilot state for the connector tool. And so I think that one of the things that's been a result of our program being relatively new is that we've had some slipping timelines that are ultimately going to negatively impact in the terms of delaying the low income benefits that are going to be received by consumers. Ultimately, those low income customers are still going to be able to participate, but just not on the same timeline we anticipated. Originally, whenever we joined as a pilot state for the connector program, we expected that the projects for our community solar program would be coming online right about the same time the connector tool was being made available. Unfortunately, in spite of our best efforts to learn from other states, because obviously we're not the first state to implement community solar, we've still incurred some delays in our timelines, and hopefully we'll continue to work through those. But that means that we're going to have to wait a little longer to deliver the benefits to all customers, but relevant to this conversation, low income customers. And so I think an important consideration is that comes out of that is to make sure that to the greatest degree possible, you have as much stakeholder buy-in as you can. Obviously, for the connector tool specifically, you want to make sure that if you have different agencies that are housing your LIHEAP functions and your community solar administration, that you have the buy-in from those folks. But also, if you have a new program and you're kind of figuring out what those timelines are going to be for being able to ramp that program up and utilize the connector, consider how much buy-in you have from the other stakeholders, including developers and utilities, anyone who might be involved in actually recognizing benefits in your program. One thing I'll also recommend that as a new state, I think it's been important for us to observe that it's really key to have the major aspects of your community solar program in place before you're really going to get the most benefit out of utilizing the connector. Specifically for us, we're still going through the process of setting the community solar bill credit rate, or the value that a customer who participates in community solar gets from their subscription, as well as the administrative costs associated with our program. And those are going to obviously inform the relative impact that being a subscriber to a community solar project could have for a customer. So if you have those aspects in place, then you're going to be able to make sure that you are meeting the requirements of the connector to provide real benefits for low-income customers. Another interesting thing that's coming kind of down the pipe for New Mexico is that we are engaging in a new rulemaking at the PRC for community solar. And so this will give us an opportunity to look back at the lessons learned. Even though we don't have projects offering subscriptions to customers yet, we still have a lot of lessons learned to see how can we improve our rules and make them better. And as an example of that, one area that might come under consideration is we don't currently have consolidated billing in New Mexico. And we know that that's a best practice for low-income customers, particularly because many low-income customers are unbanked. So something like that could improve access and make it easier for low-income customers to participate and benefit can come through in future iterations as you look at how do you improve your program through rulemaking or other processes. Next, I just want to briefly discuss the importance of integrating the connector into your existing systems. I'm pretty jealous of Daniel, honestly, because he indicated that their community solar administrative agency and their LIHEAP agency, they're housed together. That's not the case in New Mexico, but regardless of what your setup is, you might have to consider how are you going to integrate the connector into the existing systems. For us, our human services department, which houses our LIHEAP agency, our LIHEAP services, needs to make an upgrade to their existing system to be able to integrate the connector, basically make sure that on checking for eligibility for LIHEAP, that participants can also elect to participate in the community solar connector program to get those benefits. So the system upgrades aren't huge, but they do require either dedicated man hours or a budget, and they're going to have some timeline for actually getting that in place. So that was a potential barrier for us, is how are we going to get the budget or man hours to upgrade the system. Ultimately, I think that it's a benefit that we're going to be hopefully able to utilize. It looks like a collaboration with another agency in New Mexico, the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department, NREL, who, as I understand, is a recipient for one of the home energy rebate grants, and is basically going to need to do similar upgrades to the HSD systems in New Mexico to integrate the home energy rebates program offerings that they're going to be incorporating, their upgrades are going to be similar to what we would need to utilize the connector. So we're going to be able to utilize, hopefully, that opportunity to get the connector in place with our LIHEAP agency, as well as at the same time upgrading the systems for other applications. So look at how you might be able to leverage either multiple funding sources or similar programs in your state to be able to bring this to actually fruition, to be able to offer the benefits. And then the last thing I'll touch on briefly is just that, again, a little bit jealous of Daniel that the LIHEAP offices and the Community Solar Administration are housed together for him. In New Mexico, that's not the case. And that may be the case in other states as well, that you don't necessarily have those two efforts under the same house. So figure out how you're going to have that cross-agency collaboration in place, either through dedicating specific resources, person hours, or perhaps allocating a new, identifying and putting on a new person to take on the role of coordinating, communicating, or allocating hours of existing employees to be able to make sure that the coordination is there. For us, we've been really fortunate to benefit from having our ORISE fellow, Yvette Viasis, who's been able to kind of spearhead a lot of that collaboration. But if you don't have that same benefit, figure out where those resources to make that coordination happen are going to come from. And so that's really all I have for New Mexico's high-level overview. I'll be happy to address any questions with the rest of the group if there are any.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Christopher.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I think we're a little bit over time for the webinar, but I do want to just touch on a few more slides. And if folks have any questions for Christopher, feel free to put those in the Q&A. All right. I want to just cover very quickly a couple next steps for this project. So jumping to, this slide. Again, we've already kind of gone over this, but we've officially launched in those 3 pilot states. Right now, we're in the process of recruiting additional states who may want to participate in the project. Through the summer and fall, we'll be fixing and improving and incorporating user feedback into the software, and then ideally expanding to more states a bit later this year and next year. And then moving to the next slide, just want to flag, what are the current requirements for states to become a pilot state? So on here, we lay out, we currently have 3 requirements that we want to see in place in states that are coming on. We want the state to have an active community solar program with measures in place that can ensure a minimum savings requirement and consumer protections. We also want the state to have new low-income community solar subscription capacity coming online so that they can start connecting households with subscriptions within the next year. And we, as I've mentioned in a lot of the comments, we also want the state to have support and collaboration from both the State Community Solar Program Office and the State LIHEAP Office to participate in the connector. For states who are interested and or stakeholders who would like their state to be interested, feel free to email the community.solar@ee.doe.gov email address on this slide. And for states who do come on board, we have a lot of resources to help support identifying technical assistance needs or next steps in order to get both the LIHEAP program and community solar program ready to be better integrated with one another. All right, seeing as we're 5 minutes over, here are a couple of links. We'll plan to send out these slides to folks who have registered for the webinar, as well as some other useful resources to folks. So thank you all very much. Stay tuned for more webinar updates. Thank you to our state partners as well for providing those updates today. And please send any additional questions as well to the email address on the previous slide. Thank you, everyone, and hope you have a great day.